How's it going, all you awesome homies out there in video game land? We are back once again to bring you one of the dopest and freshest episodes of the Split Screen Cynics, the coolest podcast and the best podcast to talk about video games out there on the internet. I said internet twice already because I didn't know what else to say. I am 1/3 of your hosting trio. My name is Berto. I am joined with two of the coolest dudes in gaming right now. To my right, Tim. Tim, how are you?
I'm good. Just getting by, doing my thing. Not much else to say.
How was Counter-Strike?
Bad day of practice.
Sorry.
I'm trying to hide it, but it's out. Cat's out of the bag now.
Well, way to go, Garrett. And you already heard him. And if you're joining us on the video portion, or if you're joining us on Twitch, you can see him right here to my left. The guy who broke Tim's heart, Garrett. Way to go, Garrett. How are you?
I broke Tim's heart long ago, first of all. But I'm doing surprisingly well. I'm now officially a godfather, so that's cool.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah, and my suit was looking good. I got it tailored, so I'm happy about all those things. I did maybe throw out my wallet last week, so I lost all my cards and stuff, but no big deal. It's okay.
But you're a godfather.
Yeah, that's cool. And I just got one of my cards in the mail today, so I'm no longer like a subhuman that can't do things on the internet.
Think of all the money you can make off that baby.
now it's
the wallet.
Can we say that on Twitch?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe not, actually. Whatever, just don't throw your cat. Unless you're that one lady. Then you can throw your cat as much as you want.
Do you guys want gamer water? We got gamer bath water for you.
Dude, fat, sweaty dudes. Actually, we should start a line, because we kind of have three archetypes of like, Berto's kind of ripped, Tim's kind of skinny, and I'm just like a fat dude. So we could do like the triple pack.
I know how to dress. It's like underneath all of this form-fitting clothing, it's just like holding it all in. So it's just keeping it all in place.
Don't lie to me. How dare you lie to me?
It frames the silhouette very well. Underneath this is all jello.
But you could do a 3-for-1, $30 to get one of each kind of dude for your bathwater things. But I'm doing well. Back to you, Berto. How you doing?
I am doing great. I'm streaming for the first time in the new place, and it's finally not looking like a train wreck. So it's been nice. Earlier in the week, I sent out a message on your Discord server where I was like, "Hey, I am finally back online. I'm not a Luddite anymore. I live in civilization." So that was super awesome to finally get back online. Really excited for it. And as you can see, I have a window right back here, which isn't much different from my other place because I think the window is behind me.
I think it was in the same spot. Yeah.
So, just kidding. I didn't move at all because I also had the bookcase behind me with the Dragon's Sword. Nothing's changed.
The Majora's Mask, like, cool Stitch thing isn't there anymore. Or is it? I mean,
it's over here. You can't see it.
Oh, it's just off screen. All right. So it is exactly the same. You look exactly the same.
Just kidding. I didn't move at all. Ha.
Either way, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it greatly. Like I said before, thank you guys for joining us. We're your Split Screen Cynics. We just gave you our quick little intro. The normal spiel where you can find us. If you're listening to us, you found us, and we appreciate you. We appreciate your continued listening. Keep finding us. Keep downloading. Give us all the ratings. Give us all the stars. We love and appreciate all the stars. We're very needy. We like stars. Give us stars. We're like Super Mario. Give them to us.
Or just a thumbs up.
Or thumbs up.
Those
we
are
love
good
thumbs up too. And also give us comments. Tell us you love us. Tell us we're awesome. Give us constructive criticisms. Don't be a dick. No one likes being a dick.
Hate mail is cool though.
Yeah, hate mail works pretty well for content too. So send us hate mail.
If you have to send us a dickish message, make it a good one because you're only going to get one shot. We'll read it on air.
Yep. That's good. Better be good.
In addition to all the normal places you can find us, you can also find us at You The Gamers. Those dudes are amazing. We're affiliated with them, so they host our stuff there. So go over there, give them a visit, give us a listen over there, give them a listen. They put out some great content also. Dudes are awesome. We're going to be working with them at the upcoming Play NYC, but we'll talk about that later. With that intro out of the way, we're going to get to our usual first segment, which is our What You're Playing segment. So let me start with Tim because I don't see anything in the show notes for you, so it'll be a surprise to me. Tim, what are you playing?
Actually, not that much this week, other than Counter-Strike because I was trying to get back into it. But I've been playing our game club game of the week or of the month, Amid Evil. We'll be discussing that later, so I'm not going to go into that. I finished Little Nightmares, which I started weeks ago, and finally got around to finishing it with some friends. Pretty good. It's no Limbo, it's no Inside, but if you played those games and you want something like that, it'll give you a couple hours out of it. So can't talk down to it too much. Been getting back in on some Ultimate Chicken Horse. Definitely a game that I've spoken about it before, but it's definitely a game that we're gonna have to play on the Extra Life stream.
Absolutely!
sure.
I am looking forward to that for Extra
Does
Life.
that have split screen co-op?
It's not split. It's just one screen.
Yeah, it's one.
It's not co-op.
Yeah,
It's a versus game.
Sorry.
It's everyone trying to fuck everyone else over.
Yeah.
What I meant was, does it have local play?
But
And
yes,
the
it
answer is
does.
yes. Okay, cool.
So we definitely should get into that. And then the one interesting game that I can't really say how I feel about it yet, but I started playing Dynasty Warriors 9.
Yo,
They still make those?
did Tommy Ambrosio have a hand in that?
Ambrosio was a major part of that happening. But yes, Dynasty Warriors 9 is an interesting game because I haven't played any of them since 4. And they have definitely stuck to their formula while making some new stuff. And I've got to say, after playing it for about 3 hours, I'd rather just play an older one.
Now,
I would love to play an older one now.
did you play? Because I think you played some of the Hyrule one with me, right? A little bit. Is that kind of the same formula that we're talking about? Like it felt like that, or?
They've done more since then, for
Okay.
sure. It's hard to say. It's funny because you go back and it's still the same levels, it's still the same character. I mean, I'm sure there's new characters. I haven't unlocked them all, but it really makes me want to go back and play one of the older ones because as nice as Hyrule Warriors is, there's really no substitute for the Romance of the Three Kingdoms characters that we all know and love from a billion Dynasty Warriors
just
games.
Having played it a million times, yeah.
But yeah, it's trying to modernize, and you can't fault them for that. But I really am looking into a way to play the older games because it seems kind of difficult at this point to find a way to do it. Those PS2 ones, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But what about you, Garrett? What have you been playing?
So definitely Amid Evil. Obviously, I was streaming some of that last night. I finished it up today, which was actually nice to kind of rip through it that way. It felt pretty fun that way. We'll talk about that in a bit. I've been playing Gears of War 4 with my buddy Billy.
Yo, how do you like it? First, are you a Gears of War fan, or have you played any of the previous ones?
So yes, no, yes, I think was the answer.
Oh, okay,
So hold on.
Okay, that was multiple questions. I thought you were saying yes, no, and yes, and I'm like,
How do I explain this? I like Gears of War in a way because it has co-op, and that's what I'm doing with Billy. And I love playing through games co-op. I've played through the first one on co-op. I played through a good amount of the second one on co-op. Skipped the third. Now I'm on 4. I've never really cared that much about Gears of War. I think they're not that unique. They were just one of the first kind of cover shooters. I know there's like the storyline. I never really cared about it, to be honest. That's just me not getting into it. But yeah, I do like it. I like it for the co-op. The mechanics and stuff just feel kind of weird. Like the weapons just don't feel heavy to me, which seems weird in a game where it's like you chainsaw people in half. Like weapon feels
heavy. How?
So like when you're shooting enemies with a gun that's spitting out 60 rounds at a clip, it seems like the enemies barely react to it. Like occasionally they stumble, and I know that's part of just the probably just the difficulty level, because if the enemies were stumbling like crazy, obviously they wouldn't shoot back and stuff. But it seems like the guns have no weight until you kill something. And it just weirds me out. Like, it feels like I'm just shooting popcorn shooters at everybody. Like, every gun feels like the Klob from GoldenEye N64, which is weird. Unless you get, like, a headshot or something like that.
Definitely the earlier ones, I think, felt that way. I've noticed with 4 more specifically that they paid more attention. And relative to the first couple, that's probably not by much, but they were like, they added the recoil, so it's not like you were just down sights and there's no like adjusting for your aim with the Lancer.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm a little confused because I'm not saying the guns don't feel like they have weight. It's like the impact on enemies feels
gotcha.
silly. And I feel like what they need to do is like make it so that their armor starts blowing off or something, like, because it just seems like they don't react until you kill them, except for like the one stagger animation that happens every so often. That being said, co-op is great. So any game with co-op is usually an A+. The Gears of War 4 storyline seems like it's post the main storyline of those games. And we just found, I think his name's Marcus Phoenix again, so maybe it's gonna start taking off. The beginning's weird. You fight like robot security forces the whole time.
Yeah, it was weird. I'd played Gears. I'm a Gears of War fan. I like ate up all the games. Like they have books with backstory, and I bought the books. So I've read like the books by Kristen Travis, so I know like all about Gears of War. And it really hurt when I didn't buy an Xbox One because I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna be able to play Gears of War 4. But sacrifices needed to be made because PS4.
Yeah, I mean Bloodborne, even though I'm the only one who likes Bloodborne or whatever. I see Marino in chat. So yeah, to clear up the kind of heavy idea, like heavy can mean a couple things in games. Generally, it's like the response of the guns to your character, meaning recoil and stuff. But I'm specifically talking about, I guess, the damage being heavy, which is like seeing the actual physical impact on the bodies and how enemies react to it. So I guess heavy is like a weird word because it can mean both. Think of if you've played Half-Life 2, the pistol does not feel heavy. It feels really weightless because you're just like bam, 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 bam. I do like that gun though in that game. Either way,
I do like your take on that gun.
That's what that gun's like. The other thing, I haven't actually been playing it that much, but I just wanted to shout out. We had a little Smash Bros tournament at Growlers, so that's always fun to see everybody come out. We had a decent kind of response. Joe from You the Gamers was there playing his first ever matches. He went 2-2 because he got 2 buys. So on paper, he did okay. But that was a ton of fun. It's actually made me want to maybe jump back into Smash Bros. A little bit and start playing online again. So I might start streaming that in the future. But that's all I can think of. I've been playing. Berto, what have you been playing?
Before I talk about what I've been playing, I saw a video clip out there about you, cleaning, some professional or quote unquote professional Smash players' clock with King Dedede. Any truth to that rumor?
So yeah, so that video does exist. That's basically whoever wins the tournament. I'm not actually allowed to participate. Like we kind of ask if they'd like to prove their mettle against me. And the dude's actually pretty good. He got a stock off me this time. Last time I 3-stocked him, so he's getting better.
So he got a stock off me.
Yeah. This is why I don't like talking about it. It makes you sound like an asshole. Yes, I do. So far, I've played the winner twice because he's won both tournaments, and I do kind of clean up. But I've been playing that game for 30 years straight, so it's cheating.
Sounds like I'm gonna have to, show up and see what I can do.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're closer. So Wednesday night video game night, dude. But yeah, Sparta, what have you been playing in your new place?
So aside from obviously Amid Evil, which is our game club game, so all of us have played that. So we'll just take that as a given. I actually jumped into Final Fantasy 14 because that's something I've been wanting to do for the longest.
It's funny because I saw it in the show notes and I was like, Final Fantasy 14, really, Berto? I'm shocked. Yeah. I'm shocked by that.
I've been curious about that for a long time. And then obviously like I finally have hardware that can run a game like that. And I'm like, why don't I ever jump into it? And like my brother, he bought it for the PS4, but it never really clicked for him. And he gave me the game. So I kind of had it sitting there also. So I had it also for PS4 and I just never really jumped in. And I don't know what it was, but once I got the computer set up, at least I was like, I need something to play. I need something to do while, you know, the place is still a wreck. And I know that up until level 35, the game is free to play before you actually have to start paying a subscription. So I was like, you know what? Let me just jump in and see what this is all about. So I jumped in, and I'm actually having kind of a good time. It's really interesting to play a game, an MMORPG that's not designed with mouse and keyboard in mind.
Yeah, that's the crazy part to me, is that I knew the game was on consoles, but I've never actually experienced that. That's gotta be weird. Have you played MMOs before at all, by the way?
No, first time. I've only ever seen a friend of mine, Mauricio, who got really, really, really into World of Warcraft to the point where he would like disappear for days on end.
Oh, R.I.P. I know what that's like.
Happened to the best of us.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, the South Park episode with Make Love Not Warcraft. So, I mean, that's been my experience with MMORPGs. Never really dug into them myself personally. So this is my first real foray into it. And like I said, really surprised by how good the game feels on a controller, considering the level of controls and the amount of actions that you would do in an MMORPG. They mapped it to the controller very well. I mean, considering that they completely redid the game from when it launched like 10 years ago, or however many years ago it was. But yeah, it's really fun. I am liking it a lot. And I think that once I reach level 35, I might actually end up paying a subscription and continuing on with this long term.
Now, would you consider at that point like jumping to PC? I don't even know if they have like cross save or anything like that.
I'm on PC. I'm playing on PC.
Oh wait, now I'm confused. I thought you were playing on. So
I had it on PS4. My brother gave it to me, but I never actually like. It was just kind of sitting there, and I would look at it, and it would look back at me, and I would kind of like side eye it and be like. I would do one of those where I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't quite realize you were playing on PC now.
I had the option available to me on both PC and on console, but I never actually took the plunge. And it wasn't until after the move where I got the PC here finally set up and got my little stream corner that I said, you know what? Fuck it. Let me do that. So I'm enjoying it. I'm really liking it. I'm going to play up until level 35, max out my character when it's free to play, and I might actually consider, well, like I said before, long term, pay the subscription fee and get the Shadowbringers expansion, which I hear is amazing.
The Shadowbringers expansion has like crazy ratings on it.
Yeah, which is why I'm like, that was another reason when that came out, and I'm like, people are still talking about this game. The latest expansion is getting rave reviews. I'm like, okay, fine. I get it, universe. I'm going to try the game. So I finally jumped in. I made a cat character. I forget what the race is called because there's like spaces and apostrophes in the middle of the name. So I don't think I can pronounce it very well.
What class are you playing?
Right now, I am a Marauder.
Oh, okay. So I think they're like kind of
what does that mean?
Tankies.
Tanky?
Yeah.
They're like warriors, basically.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Like I usually don't play tank type characters in obviously not MMORPGs because I've never played one, but any kind of game that has specific classes, I'm always kind of like a DPS kind of character. I never played a tank. So I wanted to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. So I chose a tank class. And also because I want a gunblade, and the gunbreaker is a tank class.
Oh, there you go. There was a period of my life where I jumped into that game and I forget why. But I had like a week where I had nothing to do, and I think it was on Steam sale for real cheap. So I played like a little white mage because I normally don't heal. So I had a similar experience to you. But hey, maybe we'll get the gang together and we can start raiding.
Let's get a squad together. Let's get a party going. Who's gonna be our white mage? Who's gonna heal me when I do all my damage as a tank? And it's funny because for the race of character that I am, when I was like setting the height and everything, 5'9" or 69 inches, because they did it in inches, is like the upper limit for this race. And I'm like, that's not a very tall tank at all.
Hey, well, I kind of like that. You make like a tiny guy.
It's all like about the tiny tank.
Yeah, I'm a big tiny tank guy.
Yeah.
Well, just wait until World of Warcraft Classic comes out, Tim. All right, how about that? Are you gonna tank? Who's tanking? Are you tanking?
I don't know. I'm down.
Because that's gonna destroy my social life. But
whatever.
Thanks everyone for listening. That's been the podcast.
Yep,
there
that's it.
goes the rest of the podcast. Once
sorry to derail your Final Fantasy 14 talk, but that game really, it's I don't know how I'm gonna fit it into my life. It's weird.
It's gonna be rough. I mean, just write it off as a business expense because we're a business now. That makes
we have to,
negative
My
$20
team is not gonna be happy with me. I can say that much.
We're in the black. No, that means that's good. We're in the red.
Oh, I'll take it. Oh wait, no, red's bad.
That's what I'm saying. Because we're down $50.
Whatever. $20 worth it. Any other games, Berto? Should we move on?
No, that's really all I've been playing since the move. Still haven't tried my friend Pedro. It's sitting on my Switch, and it's just
I haven't either.
I bought it, I downloaded it, and I'm like, I need to get to it. And every time I try and get to it, I'm like, oh, the Final Fantasy 14. I'm like, fuck.
Oh, yeah, that's MMOs for you. I think my friend Pedro was in my wish list for the Steam sale, and I made the decision. I was like, I have enough. This will probably price drop before I will actually get to it. So I actually held off on that game. That looks pretty dope though. Before Cynical Spin, quickly gonna announce our next Game Club game.
Please.
So we're doing Amid Evil for this one. If you guys want to play along, got like a little indie puzzler game. It's called Baba Is You. I know it's on Steam. I actually didn't check.
I believe it's on Switch.
I'm gonna say Steam, Switch, maybe other things. I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be on other things, but basically it's like a little puzzler that basically plays with the idea of what you can use to solve a puzzle. So a lot of thinking outside the box. Sometimes you have to code the game. Sometimes you actually have to move the text on the screen around.
Think of it as like a modern indie chips challenge, if you get that reference.
I don't get that reference one bit, so
I know. I'm being a hipster and trying to profess my knowledge of all these games.
But yes, Baba Is You will be our next Game Club game. It will probably be a month from now that we do that podcast because we got Play NYC and Play Boston lined up for the next one. But try it out. Go check it out. I think it's pretty cheap, little indie game. And then you can hang out with us on episode 33. That would be for the Baba Is You Game Club. That being said, let's go to Cynical Spin. We'll get some gaming news in. Do you want me to start this off, Berto?
I was about to say, you want to start off with the first news item?
Sure. So I'm going to kind of put two news items together. A lot of Epic Game Store stuff in the news, obviously with the Fortnite World Championships and so on and so forth. But here's this is a little more about the indie side, indie dev things. First up, we have this game called Ooblets, announced Epic exclusivity on their website and Twitter and so on and so forth. The game apparently is like a cross between Animal Crossing, Pokemon, and kind of like farming simulators like Harvest Moon.
I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it compared to like Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley meets Pokemon meets Animal Crossing. So
yeah, and
nothing I would play.
It looked pretty cute. I'm very into those games for some reason. I don't know why. I think cute stuff works for me on video games. However, things didn't go so well during the announcement. So a key part of this is realizing that this game was actually mostly crowdfunded. There was a Patreon set up. Apparently there was a couple thousand, I think it was like 1,081 different Patreon supporters that were all kicking money towards this game's development. It's two main devs. It's a guy and his wife, I believe. Essentially, they announced Epic Store exclusivity, and they kind of did like a half and half. Like half of it was explaining why, which was kind of cool because they said they actually basically were covered by Epic Game Store and guaranteed the money they thought they would make on other platforms, which is an extremely useful tool for an indie dev studio to essentially guarantee you're going to make money and be able to continue. The issue is they also did this weird kind of tongue-in-cheek thing on the side of that. They were talking about like how people are like, darn Karl Marx teaching gamers to hate Epic Game Store. They had this weird kind of attitude. It came off a little bit condescending, and it kind of hit a bad note with a lot of users. Certain Patreon users were basically like, hey, in my country, Epic Game Store doesn't actually support our currency. How can I actually access this game that I've been kicking $20 a month to? So naturally, there's some anger. It always happens with Epic Game Store exclusivity. And then it turned into this weird basically they shut down their Reddit page. They were on Discord. The main developer, had a bit of an issue with his attitude a little bit, where he was kind of talking about how entitled gamers, you don't deserve the game. Like, we never promised you the game, stuff like that. Even with guys who like literally couldn't buy it on Epic Game Store. And then it turned even more sour because he started getting tons of threats. Someone faked a Twitter thing where he was talking about gas chambering gamers. They went so far as to Photoshop a video or edit a video of him posting that, which is totally fake. So obviously this spiraled out of control.
Yeah.
So that's story number 1. I'm going to drop story number 2 as well, because I think they kind of go hand in hand a little bit. So the other story is Skatebird, which is a little, I believe it was a Kickstarter game. Basically, it's Tony Hawk, but you're playing like a little pudgy bird. It looks kind of cute. Megan Fox, not that Megan Fox.
I was about to say, wait.
Yeah.
That Megan Fox?
So she's the founder of Glass Bottom Games, which is making Skatebird. She came out on Twitter and basically said they went to Epic to be like, hey, can we release, our game on Epic? And Epic basically said, because they offered Steam keys through their Kickstarter, that Epic was not interested because they are pursuing only, why can't I think of the name? Exclusive titles, basically. So this came out. This is a bit of an issue because this is completely counter to what Tim Sweeney, I think is the guy?
Yep.
Yeah. He has said all over Twitter and everything that basically Epic Game Store is all about developers, them making their money. The exclusives thing is just to push Steam to pay developers more, this and that. So basically what it came down to was Epic Game Store didn't think it was worth it to put this game on their store unless it was exclusive. So that's another thing. A lot of Epic stuff in the news. What are your guys' responses to this as far as like a whole? Because it basically seems like if you're a small indie dev and you join Epic, things are gonna go wrong in every way but financially, because at least Epic's gonna kick you some money. But what are your guys' kind of responses to these?
I think there's a lot to this. When it comes to in response to what you were just saying about like small indie devs and Epic, I do think that it's not the worst idea in the world, especially like I don't know the numbers involved with signing an exclusivity deal with Epic, but I think it can be fine. This is obviously a dev that, it harkens back to Phil Fish or something like that, who's not afraid to back down and saying the way that he feels. I have no interest in this game, and I have no, I'm generally anti-Epic Store, but I don't think that a dev should be just completely lambasted just for saying basically like gamers, like stop whining. If you want the game, just download this free store. That being said, I can understand, especially in this age, that making a move like that publicly is it can be a terrible PR. We'll see how the numbers play out for them and whether or not their future prospects are hurt by this. But right now, their public image is about as low as you could possibly imagine. On the other side, with Epic, I was reading about this on Reddit, and I saw someone said something interesting. With the Epic Store kind of catering to developers, like it seems like a great idea on paper, but at the end of the day, like what is this doing for consumers? If all of this is benefiting them to get this giant library of games to the point where they can kind of control it, like all these developer friendly practices, it looks great on paper. But when it spins into this situation where it's actually turning developers against their audience, and it's kind of waging this war, then I think it's going to have the opposite effect. It's important for developers to have good, like with the whole crunch thing. They should be focused on a little bit more in terms of the conversation, but by just pointing your finger at the consumers and saying you're being immature, you should follow, just grow up and buy this game on this platform if you want it. It's just turning into this battle, and I don't think it's ever a good idea to antagonize your potential customers, and I think that's what we're dealing with now. In regards to the Skatebird situation, I think it's just kind of filling in the blanks with what's going on with Epic and their strategies. I am a little hesitant to jump on the bandwagon and just say like, oh, obviously Epic, like they're being, they're just trying to benefit themselves and grow their game market with exclusives to combat Steam. It does seem like a little bit of like okay, this is like a convenient sort of one thing that happened, and we're gonna turn this into like this whole narrative about like, oh, this is here, you see it, like look at Epic, look at what they're doing. They're trying to only get exclusives and prevent anyone with Steam keys from doing it. But it's just one example. I think it's a little bit of an overreaction to just one thing. So I'm just trying to stay as neutral as possible about this issue
I was
because
gonna say you got the middle there.
I know.
Pretty well.
I like, on paper, I'm definitely against what Epic Store is trying to do, but I try to not get, too wrapped up in the things that people say about it because, the narrative is almost never as insane as it seems.
Yeah, and that whole jumping on this one thing, I agree with you, Tim, because I actually at first did kind of jump on it. I was like, oh, obviously, like, I never truly believed that Epic 100% only cares about devs. Obviously, they're trying to make a business somehow, some way. And, when Sweeney's on Twitter saying, oh, it's all about the devs, like, that's all that matters. Like, I don't truly believe that. So I did actually kind of want to jump down their throat on this one a little bit. When I looked into it more, I did kind of start seeing that, like, okay, it's a small indie game. Like, at the moment, Epic is a relatively small store. Like, I don't know what kind of sales they make, but, they're having issues with their infrastructure and security a little bit. So, like, taking on every game may not be possible and be worthwhile for them to even do, considering the scope of their store at the moment, which again is lacking some features, has some security issues, etc. So I did kind of, I don't see that as 100% like, Epic doesn't care about devs. I do think you're right in that it's a small case. What was nice was that developer was basically like, listen, we have 30K pre-orders on Steam, like we're gonna do just fine, so it's not that big a deal to us. And that kind of made me feel good because it was like they weren't necessarily like being like, hey, witch hunt for Epic. They were just being like, hey, just so you know, this kind of stuff happens. Berto, what are your thoughts on these?
So I know Tim took sort of the middle ground, and Garrett, you're more on the, are we going to call it the right or the left when you're like anti-Epic?
I'm always anti-Epic for the most part.
Right, no, but I'm saying
yeah.
Tim's like on the middle. So is anti-Epic, is that going to be our right or our left for purposes
let's
of
just call it down and up.
Down and up. Okay.
I'm down. Okay. I'm down
right,
on it.
Down on Epic. Which is good because now we have three sides of the argument. Tim's in the middle. Garrett, you're down on Epic. I've said in the past, because obviously we've talked about the Epic exclusivity. This is not a topic that's new to us in our conversations. I think what Epic is doing is good for competition. I think that having a company take it to Steam, who pretty much has a monopoly on in this kind of digital games medium space, it's always a good thing when you have options. And now I know that the people who play these games, who download these games, always bitch and moan about the fact that, but the Epic launcher doesn't have functions, and I get it. They're severely lacking in the capabilities and the functionality that you have through Steam. But really, how much harder is it to download another launcher to get another game? I mean, don't we do the same shit already with our consoles? Like, if you want to play a Mario game, you have to get a Nintendo console. I don't hear anyone bitching and moaning that they can't play Mario on an Xbox One or a PS4. So why, when it comes to downloading a free launcher, instead of having to buy a $300 Switch system or whatever, why is that an issue now? On that, like, just on the surface, that's always been my stance, and I'm going to stand by it. Where I do think there have been some sort of gaffes is in the developer in Ooblets, the Ooblets developer's response, where he was trying to get a little bit too tongue-in-cheek to try and be, funny in how he's approaching the whole why we're on Epic. And then he's like, well, you guys don't want to play games. That's why people need PR to step in and be like, listen, I get what you're trying to say, but let me craft the message for you so it doesn't come out like you're being a, pompous prick. So there were mistakes made on that end. I definitely, I will admit to that, but I don't see Epic's involvement and Epic's dealing in exclusivity, even if it's like short-term exclusivity, because I don't think these are always like, these aren't going to be long-term exclusive games. I think it's just launch exclusivity. I don't see that as a bad thing for the industry. Competition is always a good thing because it's always going to make everyone step their game up a little bit more.
So I guess I didn't chime in on the Ooblets thing last time. So first of all, obviously, like, I don't think any of us agree that they deserve the amount of hate that they are currently getting.
No, gamers are the fucking worst.
Unfortunately, when it gets to the internet, especially with video game people.
Yeah, like they really are. They act like they're super entitled to everything, and obviously when things like this happen, the worst of it comes out.
Yeah, and I do think I think Tim's kind of right, and I think you're kind of right. Like, the PR is an issue, especially when the devs like throwing back at a guy who literally, like, Epic Game Store doesn't accept his currency. How can he get the game? And the guy's like, you're an entitled gamer. Like, that's an actual thing that he said. Like, that happened. So PR is an issue. I do think the announcement, like, was close to being okay. Like, it was cool that they said that the reason they did it was for monetary reasons. Like, I respect that. Because you've had some other people come out and be like, no, Epic Game Store is, like, clearly the best choice amongst launchers. And it's like, okay, we know you're doing it for the money, so just say that. And I like that they were kind of like upfront about that. The other stuff is a PR nightmare, just being condescending towards the people who gave you money to build the game. Like, that's right. That's an issue.
And it's going to be a problem because, like you said, it was just two people developing that game. So obviously they clearly don't have PR training.
They clearly cannot, afford somebody to do PR for them full time, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit of a mistake, unfortunately, due to the nature of the internet. People really jump down your throat when you make a mistake, so that part's unfortunate. It's funny because Lupulus Warlock in chat, he's saying progressive web apps, basically, like, this conversation will be mute in a few years. And did I say mute? I meant moot. Moot in a few years. And I almost want to, like, agree with that. Like, I don't think my main issue with Epic is the fact that I have to download another launcher. I actually have downloaded the launcher. I have it on Xbox, and I downloaded it to try out Fortnite back in the day. I just personally think that while competition is a good thing, and I agree with you, Berto, like, hopefully it brings Steam a little more in line. Hopefully they kick more to their developers and stuff. I would love that. I think that the issue for me is that at the end of the day, like what Tim was saying, it seems to only hurt consumers. Like, I'm not going to play Borderlands 3 for 6 months. Basically is what it's going to mean. Like, is that a huge issue? No, I'm fine with playing games years later. I do it all the time. But, like, the fact that if my buddies want to play and, like, are willing to do the Epic launcher, and I don't like the Epic launcher for their business practices for the most part. Like, that, I think exclusivity is, like, the bane of video games. I wish no games were exclusive. And I know that Nintendo and Sony and so on.
Yeah, but it happens all the time in the console.
It happens, and it's part of the practice. But I do also think that a lot of the console space is, like, that's also developed in-house. A lot of it, like Nintendo, Mario, Zelda, etc. Those are all developed in-house. Obviously, they had exclusivity on, Monster Hunter Tri or whatever when it came back out forever. And that's clearly they just paid for it, right? Like, that's understandable to be upset about. However, just because other companies do it, I don't think that every company should do it.
So then, as far as exclusivity, you're saying if it's developed in-house, like Nintendo, for example,
I completely understand.
Versus an exclusivity deal like Sony Santa Monica, like, obviously that's a Sony-owned studio. It's a third-party developer. That game, God of War, only came out for Sony. That kind of exclusivity deal is those are the kinds of exclusivity deals you're against.
So the thing about, like, Santa Monica Studios, like, they're pretty much a Sony.
That's their Sony studio. So maybe that wasn't such a good example.
But so here's my main, and this is my, like, closing thing essentially, is, like, I have Fortnite on PC. I have Fortnite on console. That's developed by Epic Games. I have no issue using their launcher for that. The fact that I think it's Supergiant Games, I still haven't played their game because it was an Epic exclusive. Like, that sort of sucks for consumers. The fact that you can't team up your friends list between them. To me, it's being competitive in an anti-consumer fashion, and that's kind of why I don't want to use Epic. I don't mind if Epic comes out with the Unreal Tournament 2020, which would be sick. I'll download the launcher in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? Like, if they're making it, you can make it exclusive. I get that. That's how Valve started Steam. You know, the orange box, you had to install Steam. You know what I mean? So that's what Bethesda does with their games. That's what Ubisoft does with their games. Like, I'm willing to do it if you develop in-house. The fact that you're just shoving money around to essentially like win business, like that to me is like a little anti-consumer. It happens, whatever. But
yeah. Also, in the console debate, it's like if you could have one console that could play all the games, wouldn't you love that? Like, I know it's apples to oranges.
did you see that PC build where they put all the shit in one?
I saw that and I wanted it.
Yeah.
I never I was like, oh
Yeah. I think that with PC, it's like it's always been this way, and now you're splitting it up.
And
I know it's just
I'm gonna jump
but
on what you're saying,
yeah.
Tim, because again, Lupulus Warlock in chat brought up that console space is separate because basically he's saying anything on desktop should have parity, which is essentially no individual launchers. And that's actually been a staple in PC for a long time, where the PC kind of environment and atmosphere has been a sort of open choice thing. Obviously, in the last 10 years, that's changed with all these launchers via Steam, which is relatively open, I think Steam is, but Ubisoft, Bethesda, Blizzard.net, like all these launchers kind of keeping it a little to themselves. Yeah. So I think it's a little bit against the PC idea. Origin as well. I forgot about Origin. God, I hate Origin too. That's like one of the worst.
Could you imagine if like on your Switch you had to download like, proprietary launcher for each company that made games for the Switch? Like,
yeah,
I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, but
I mean, it sort of is, because Steam, you have to download like Ubiplay or whatever. If you buy, you have to download those bullshits. And that's the thing. I don't like any of them. I don't think it's a big hassle to download something, but I think what Epic is doing is not quite the same as what Bethesda and Ubisoft and Steam and Blizzard are doing. Because no one's mad at GOG. No one's mad at these other distribution companies. And
I mean, that we know of. It's just that Epic is
it's
company. They're getting all the headlines,
and that's true. It's everyone. It's cool to hate Fortnite too, as well. So
I mean, yeah, especially actually, we didn't even put that in the news, but I guess we can mention it briefly as a segue into the next one. Everyone should hate Fortnite, especially if you're 16 years old and winning $3 million.
There's nothing wrong with that. Well, that's going to come up. Trust me. So let's move it. You want to do this next one, Berto?
I was about to say, so with that, we're going to go into a split screen segue into our next news article.
Oh my God. Split screen segue? That is amazing. Trademark that quick.
Split screen segue. Let me write that down right now. Split screen segue. Okay.
Kotaku's probably already got it.
I know. They're like, ha, we got your split screen segue right here. You guys heard about, some dude named Ninja, Tyler Blevins, big, apparently he's like this big Fort stream.
The joke is over now. I was gonna play along, but it's
damn it. I realized that I became self-aware. But yeah, apparently this guy Ninja's a big deal. Who knew? He's up and leaving Twitch. Well, he up and left Twitch. By the time you guys hear this, he is already gone. He is broken up with Twitch. He said, "It's not you, it's me." He sent them a Dear John, and he jumped ship to Mixer. I haven't seen or couldn't find any deals, any terms of this deal. I've heard anything from like 50 million over 6 years to like some ungodly number, like 500 million.
I kept hearing the six years thing, but I couldn't find anything.
I know it's a 6 year deal because that's like the one constant that I've been able to find, but I couldn't find any monetary value. But you bet your ass that it's significant dollar value. So yeah, Ninja is gone from Twitch. He's now on Mixer, and actually his first like live stream was from Lollapalooza this past Friday. On Mixer. I don't know how it went. I was trying to see if I could find figures.
I found some figures. I'm going to kind of quote from an article. I found an article on GameIndustry.biz. Basically, he had 80,000 concurrent viewers. He got over 500,000 subs, although they were made free for this limited time. So that doesn't really count. And apparently the Mixer app is like super trending on, the iTunes store or whatever it's called. So basically, he is off to a strong start on Mixer, and then Mixer by, kind of proximity is also doing very well as far as app downloads and stuff.
I just have the news, and this news was covered everywhere, not just on typical gaming outlets. Kotaku obviously covered it, IGN, GamesIndustry.biz, but you'd also find it on, I think, the Wall Street Journal reported on it, ESPN.
I saw BBC. Yeah, it's
it was like all over the place. And I just wrote down a quick quote here from Mr. Ninja Blevins. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity Switch has provided me, but as I looked the next step in my career, I wanted to be somewhere that empowered me to push the boundaries of gaming and achieve bigger goals within the industry. Mixer provides me with more ways to connect with my community. And I just pulled that really quick from ESPN. And I know that he's looking to branch out just from streaming and wants to do other stuff, maybe hosting. I know he has some books coming out that he's written later in the year. This is all like, I think that he's positioning himself to be sort of like the face of streaming, but without actually being behind a camera for like 16 hours a day.
So it's funny because this kind of has three things to it, which is essentially
and also money. Points out
and money. But you have Ninja, you have what it means for Ninja, what it means for Twitch and Mixer, and like kind of what it means for at least the United States, if not the Western world.
Please expound. That's a big leap right there.
So let me jump on that one first. So this story was reported on BBC, New York Times, Wall Street, whatever. I had people coming up to me in the bar being like, "Did you hear that this 16-year-old kid won something $3 million or whatever?" So like,
in our backyard.
Yeah, my brother actually went to it. He said it was dope. The arena was air conditioned.
That's ridiculous. I mean, it's an enclosed arena. I've been to like Arthur Ashe Stadium just visiting. It's a nice arena, and I was considering going, but that was the same weekend as the move, so I was like, fuck.
Yeah. So my brother actually went. And this is, to me, this sort of interesting big world thing. This is to me a huge turning point in what you're going to see attitudes in at least the West change toward video games, because suddenly you have 16-year-old kids making $3 million at a video game tournament. This has been going on. It's just not been known of. Dota 2 has been the internationals had prizes of upwards of 20 million for the top team, which when you break it down is 5 million a person. Obviously it gets split up or whatever. But this is the first time I feel like the world has been awoken to how powerful esports actually are and how much money they can make and how lucrative they can be and so on and so forth. Obviously business investors and stuff, Comcast owns teams and so on. But suddenly you have everyday people being like, wait a minute, like if I had a 16-year-old kid who's good at Fortnite, he could make $3 million at a tournament. So I think
go ahead.
Sorry. I think you're going to see the start of the avalanche of Western attitudes changing towards what video games and esports can be. And a kid who goes to college for a scholarship in League of Legends is not going to be as weird as it was before this incident.
You have colleges already that have like esports programs and esports scholarships.
Yeah. And I think this event, the Fortnite Championship specifically, is the first big one to hit like mainstream media across the Western kind of media thing. I think I don't know if I brought it up on the Gamers Playing the Game that me and Tim did or our last episode, but I brought up that kind of, in Asian countries, it's not abnormal to see kids, essentially training for esports and stuff. Like, it's not seen as this weird, like, the dude's in his basement, like, oh my God, he has to go outside, or like, how will he get a real job kind of thing. Whereas now I think you'll start to see that attitude change slightly. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
I'm just waiting for like my mom to come up to me like one day and she'd be like, "Ay, pero mijo, do you know about these ninja?"
Dude, like it's the people that have mentioned it to me at Growlers.
Comes to me and asks about like Ninja and Mixer and like, pero they played in the Flushing Park in Arthur Ashe and Epic. I'm gonna be like, shit, my mom's talking about it now.
That's what I'm saying. Like
we've reached peak saturation.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see going forward how games are treated. Although, still blamed for violence, but whatever. So the other thing, and let's go to somebody else maybe. So like what it means for Mixer and Twitch and Ninja himself. You guys kind of commented on the Ninja thing. Obviously, we're all kind of thinking about money. I think it's a genius move by him because he's no longer like, he no longer has to be a slave to his fan base. You know what I mean?
No. He doesn't have to sit behind a computer for like 14 hours a day. Like the dude put in the work already. He put in his sweat equity, and he's gotten to the point where he's like the face of streaming. Like, you think streaming, like Ninja and streaming go hand in hand. Like, he is such a well-known name at this point that he has that social equity that he can trade in on, that he can go out and like do appearances, he can host. He doesn't have to play this game for the rest of his life anymore to make bank.
Yeah, and it's also and if he signed this deal for any less than like $25 million, he's a complete idiot. But whatever money he has banked now, it's like he doesn't really care if he gets the most viewers. You know, he can play a game he wants to play. Maybe obviously Microsoft is gonna pump him into things he might not want to do as far as what games to play and stuff. But I think for him, it's a great opportunity to like essentially take a break from being in the spotlight 24/7. Tim, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that at all.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack, I guess, with all these details. I do think it's funny that statement that he read. It sounds so suspiciously like those statements you were talking about earlier that indie companies make when they sign deals with Epic, where it's just like, oh, this is just a perfect opportunity for me to do the things I want to do. It's like, yeah, I believe it.
With all the money they're giving.
Yeah, but
strange how that works.
I don't blame him for taking the PR high road and just doing the thing, saying the right things. But we'll see. I don't have any, like, as me speaking myself, I don't feel any real brand loyalty to Twitch. So if Twitch takes like gets hit a little bit by this, which I'm sure they will, then I don't think like, oh, this is diluting the product that I consume. I also am definitely not a Ninja viewer, so it doesn't really affect me, and that's not really my type of content. But I do think it should be interesting to see how going forward, whether or not Twitch is going to continue to be this monolith of video game streaming, or whether or not this is going to open the door, because I know YouTube streaming was like, it's still there are people who stream on YouTube, but
I believe it goes basically Twitch, YouTube is like a distant second, and then Mixer's like a super third, although this has probably changed that dynamic a bit.
Mm-hmm. But
I mean, Twitch is still the king in the castle.
Yeah, I think for Twitch it doesn't mean anything more than it's a kick in the ass. And as a guy who is affiliated on Twitch, so like obviously I have some loyalty there. I actually read today that I can't actually stream my streams out to multiple services, or that was last night. Because my brother-in-law Joe, who was a lawyer for 10 years, looked in the clause, and basically it's like you can't stream to other platforms while on Twitch. So I have some loyalty because of that. I think it's a good thing for Twitch, because Twitch has basically been like a garbage heap of just miscalculations as far as the way it treats its rules and how it hands out bans and so on and so forth.
You know what this means? This just opened the way for you to be the next big thing.
I could be the number one cat thrower on Twitch.
There is a power vacuum right now in Twitch. You could fill that void.
It's funny because there has been a scramble of other Fortnite streamers to fill the void. And I don't think this is going to hurt Twitch's overall numbers that much. No. But I think it might be a kick in the ass for them to be like Amazon might step in and be like, okay, we need to do our rules and guidelines better, and we need to add some functionality better. Because Mixer they have like co-op streaming built in.
Their functionality, from what I hear, I've not used it, but I've heard that it's actually very, very good.
Yeah, I mean the way that apparently chat, there's like a way that chat can take over the controls in Windows games and stuff. Like they have some dope functionality. Obviously they don't have the user base, they don't have the community, etc. They're gonna get some of the community from Ninja, which might be garbage, because I don't know if you've seen his streams, but they're not worth being in chat for.
I've never been on a Ninja stream, so I don't know what the quality or the tone of the stream is.
I've watched him just to see what it's about, and honestly, he's a pretty family friendly guy. He rarely curses and stuff, but it's a weird stream to be a part of because just chat is just going a billion miles. Well, he doesn't hate women. He just thinks they're too much drama to stream.
It's convenient for me to think that he hates women, so he hates women.
All right, we'll think that way.
We're making our own narrative here.
It's Chris actually brought up in chat. He thinks there's a lot of mental breakdowns possible, not like a 10-hour a day gaming, than athletics and parental pressure, which is like, that's an interesting thing to me because like athletics, I don't think mentally. I don't know. I'm not an athlete.
There was I would imagine, again, and I'm not an athlete either, and I've never been like at any kind of level beyond like T-ball when I was 5. But I would imagine that there's a bigger physical component, which isn't to say there isn't a mental component, because if you make it to like the upper echelons in traditional sports, you're 18 years old and you make it to the NBA, or you're 18 years old, you get to the NHL, and you're like 21 years old and you're getting to the NFL. Like, you're still a kid and you have like all this thrust upon you. So I'd imagine that takes a toll on you mentally, but the physical also is a huge component versus streaming or like esports, where there isn't much of a physical component beyond maybe like carpal tunnel and like being hunched over, things like that.
Deep vein thrombosis, bro.
But
Nate, remember to stretch.
But like sitting at a computer for 10, 12, 14 hours a day, reading comments, and the amount of vitriol that'll get thrown at you if people don't like you, and if you're not very good about being able to deflect that and you take that and internalize it, I can see how that has it can really take a toll on you mentally.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see, because we haven't seen the outcome of this. Like,
that's the other thing.
Are all streamers going to end up
that's the other thing we don't know, because
this
is relatively new, so we don't have that like research sample size, because this is such a relatively new phenomenon. We're not going to know the ultimate effects until like 5, 10, 15 years down the line.
And I think personally, I think the hardest aspect of streaming, probably as a famous streamer versus someone like me who's just usually with friends, is being on for that entire period. Like, not only do you have to watch what you say and what you do, but you have to be putting out your persona, whether it's truly you or something like Dr. Disrespect that you put up. But like, to do that and try not to offend essentially the majority of people, while also conforming to the terms of service and so on and so forth, like, it is work. I think a lot of people don't realize how much work it can be.
It absolutely is.
So that having to be on for that time, I think, is mentally quite taxing. So for Ninja, it might be, this might be a godsend, because he can kind of relax a little bit.
I only have to put up a front 8 hours a day at work. I don't really like that's easy peasy for me to do. I don't have to put up a front for like 14 hours.
Actually, it's weird, because bartending is, I kind of am just doing the same thing, except one's over the internet.
I refuse to feel any sympathy for people who make money doing this stuff.
How dare you, Tim? Feel sympathy for me.
No, not you. I'm talking about the ninjas of the world.
I made $100. You son of a
I
bitch.
subscribed to you last night, dude.
Dude, I know. Thank you so much.
Your audience.
Tim, I really appreciate it for the Amazon Prime. So.
Oh shit! I got to use Amazon Prime for. Hold
please,
on.
enough. I'm editing this out. Let's move on.
Just in relation to that esports thing, just to be my Debbie Downer self. I think it's a shame that some random kid got all this attention and all this money for winning a Fortnite stream, because I think anyone who follows like esports and things like that can objectively say that it's not a good esport. I'm not going to say it's a bad game. I'm not going to say
it's a terrible esport. I think
it's the game itself is not a good esport, but I will say the production value for that weekend, they made it very easy for like a layperson to follow. That's what sold it. I think that's what really did it. The people who put the production together understood that we need to sell this to, Joe Schmo on the street, so that he can come in and watch this and understand what's going on. And they did a very good job of that.
No, I'm not speaking ill of that, but I can almost guarantee you're not going to see this guy going to tournaments and winning back-to-backs, getting a bunch of wins. This is, like he got his win. He's, he earned it. He has his money, but it's, like, I do feel bad for the people who have played other games, who have been working for years and years and years and have been grinding away and been winning tournament after tournament after tournament, and have made a fraction of that. even though they've been at the top of their game for this long. And you can only complain so much because obviously there's a bigger audience for Fortnite than there is for these other games. But I just think it's a shame that
I was about to draw parallels to Major League Soccer, men's and women's there.
Oh yeah,
on that one, it's weirdly similar.
It's true. But I do also think that like the audience for a big Fortnite event isn't that much bigger than the audience for the bigger events of other games. It's just because they have this financial backing from Epic Games that they can just throw at it, and
but the sponsorships and stuff, like, dude, Red Bull and all the sponsorships, I would disagree with you there, and I think that aside from Overwatch League and maybe the Dota International, you're not going to see anywhere near the level of sponsorship.
I'm talking about viewership, though. I'm talking about
viewership,
eyes watching the tournament, level of interest, which is what the parallel to like soccer, men's versus women's, eventually comes to. And I do think that it's not a direct comparison to make in terms of how much money is being made. But I'm just being a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, you just want to see some Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike up there. I think you'll start to see a change because there was a lot of buzz about Evo that just happened. Evolution, which is like probably the biggest fighting games tournament.
Leroy, what's his name? Leroy something.
Jenkins?
No, not Jenkins. It's a new character that they announced in like Tekken 7 who look it up. Look it up. They're like, oh, yo, it's this dude from New York, and you look at him, and his name is like, really, bro, come on,
dude. That's just Tekken. Tekken is all about.
It's
but Evo is has generated more buzz than it ever has before. So I think you're going to start to see that change a little bit, Tim. I do think whatever the popular game is at the moment, as well as whatever game can generate the most production value, will kind of win out. Because Overwatch League, again, that game's not really built for esports, that much. And Blizzard Activision kind of turned it into an esport by just pumping money into it, essentially. So I do think, I wish I could see some Warcraft 3 on ESPN, I'd love to see that stuff, but I think that's just the nature of the game, that whatever,
it's gonna be on the show.
Whatever has the money and whatever makes the money is going to be what's popular. But Evo, dude, the Smash Finals was good.
His name.
Leroy Smith. All right.
And it's like when I saw that, I'm like, oh, god damn it, Tekken, really Tekken.
They had a panda at one point. People forget. Should we move?
It was my go-to.
Should we finish off?
Let's finish. Yeah, let's finish off our cynical spin. ESA, they're not very good at what they do, so they're trying to keep E3 relevant by selling gamer passes and making it up to the public for the first time like 2 years ago. So they're trying to save E3 because E3 is going the way of the dinosaurs. And just recently, something else happened where it's like, god damn it, ESA, you're just fucking this up left and right. And they I'm going to say unintentionally because I can't imagine they did this intentionally. They unintentionally doxed about 2,000 journalists, reporters, video game analysts, and basically everyone who attended this past E3. Their personal information was made available to anyone who knew how to access it. And thanks to a YouTuber by the name of Sophia Narwitz, they were able to access that information because she made a video showing you exactly where to find it. She claims she did that to help them, and she's like, well, eventually it was going to be public knowledge, so this was sort of like my way to warn them about it. But
a whistleblow that also gets her clicks.
And she put that out there, and she's like, I'm going to show you where it is because it's going to be public knowledge, so I'm just going to let you know it's out there. And yeah, are you fucking kidding me, ESA? Like, how do you do this shit?
Yeah, I mean, this is
it's just as a microcosm of the modern world.
Yeah, it's just, this is everywhere, unfortunately.
Like, it's just everyone knows everything. Everyone who doesn't know things are collecting information on people so they can sell it to other people or use it to their advantage, whether it be on purpose or negligent. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And then there's other people who are going to capitalize on that for their own personal gains, and it's just a cycle of people, making mistakes and capitalizing on other people's mistakes.
I'm waiting for the lawsuits.
I was gonna say, because are you on that list, Berto? Because
I hope. Well, I
you
didn't
had
go
a
to-
media pass, didn't you?
My phone number's on that list.
I think it affected the people who went this past year in 2019.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't. It wasn't 2018.
I'm straight. And also, even if it was last year, they only have like my home address from last year. So good luck with that, suckers. I don't live there anymore.
Take that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Suck it. No, it would have sucked if they had my information, because I was also more than likely part of that Capital One leak that happened like 2 weeks ago, because I have Capital One.
Oh yeah, I luckily was not on that one, but I was on the other thing that everyone's. Yeah, I was on that, but I did the smart thing and like kept my right to sue instead of cashing in on probably no money.
Yeah,
I think Tim's right. Like, this is just the way the modern world works nowadays. Like, the really shitty thing is that companies just don't say it right away. They're always like, and then they release it like,
yeah, and then like you gotta wait for some YouTuber named Sophia who's like trying to up her click rate.
Yo,
like,
good for her. She got some clicks out of it. Like, whatever.
Clicks is the currency of today.
Yeah.
So.
Clicks are the social currency. It's God, like, how do you not, like, how can you let something like this happen? You're a big company. You're like the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association. You guys should have a lock on shit like this.
I mean, the weirdest part is that from what it sounded like and what I read, like, essentially they made it like it wasn't like a leak so much as it was just available.
It was just there.
Yeah, so that's
like
just
available.
a huge.
Yeah, it was like, here's a list of everyone who showed up, and here's the public information. And even after they took the list down, you could still access it if you didn't like refresh your browser's cache. You could still like go to the cache information, and like the list would still be there.
Oh, geez.
So
okay.
So at that point, when they finally took it down, I'm pretty sure people figured out that they can go into the browser's cache, get it, archive the information, and I'm sure lists are everywhere. And like I've seen on Twitter, journalists already getting crank calls and things like that, getting harassed to varying degrees. I saw one story that I read, I forget who the particular journalist was, but somebody's like, "Hey, I've got an exclusive for you about Half-Life 3. You interested?" Ha 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 ha. So
I shouldn't laugh at that, but
that's probably one of the more benign ones. But then I'm sure
it could be used for malicious shit. Unfortunately,
well, I'm saying, I'm sure if you have journalists like Jason Schreier, who's an amazing journalist, but he puts out pieces that, because of the nature of what he writes about, he's an investigative video game journalist, probably ruffles some feathers. I can't imagine that he hasn't got his fair share of, unpleasant calls or unpleasant, emails or things like that. So the possibility for harassment of varying degrees is incredibly high, and shame on you, ASA. Like, how the fuck?
Again, this is just unfortunate because you have basically anyone who would care about this list is going to be in the internet/gaming stratosphere, and as we know from previous news stories, the internet's not too nice.
The internet's the fucking worst.
Again, unfortunately, not the majority. It's a small minority, I think, but they stink. So
yeah, but they corrupt it. They corrupt the whole thing.
They ruin it. Should we move on to segment 3?
Let us go on to our third segment. Yeah. That's enough negativity. Let's go to some good stuff.
I wanted to see, because this is essentially the first of our pick game club. So Tim actually did pick this one. Tim, do you want to give a quick intro about Amid Evil?
Sure. Yes. I chose Amid Evil because looking at it and what I heard about it on the Steam page and everything like that, it was a throwback to early id Software first-person shooters. Mostly Quake, I would say, is the closest comparison I can find for it. It has more of a fantasy backdrop as opposed to Quake, which is more sci-fi. But I've had the craving for a nice old Quake-esque fast-paced first-person shooter, and this seemed right up my alley. It is the story is pretty cookie cutter. It's basically just go through the 8 worlds, defeat enemies, and become the savior of the universe. But it's kind of a nice twist on the typical first-person shooter genre. All of your weapons are kind of magical artifacts. You have to go around. Instead of ammo, you have mana. But other than that, it feels very familiar if you've played those old games. And it doesn't try to make itself any more complicated than it is. I had a great time playing it.
Well, hold on. Let me jump in before we get into the details. So essentially, just for anyone that doesn't know, Game Club episodes, basically we put out a game, you play along, and you can kind of talk with us. You might get featured on the podcast. If you're in chat right now and you've played or have questions about the game, please drop questions or comments in Twitch chat.
Yes,
and then essentially the conversation, the starter that we always kick off is like, what do you have expectation wise going in, and what do you think of it now? And I'll kick it back to you, Tim.
My expectations going in were nothing complicated. It's just like I said, just straightforward, just hack and slash, run and gun sort of situation. Just fast paced, full on first person shooting. And I can definitely say that those expectations were met for me. What about you guys? How did you guys? What was your first impressions of the game? I guess when you first booted it up.
So when I first booted it up, I immediately throwed back to like the DOS days of playing first person shooters. I loved the graphics. I'm like, oh, this feels so like warm and fuzzy. It got me back to mouse and keyboard.
Ooh,
nice.
Whoa! Okay.
I actually, yeah.
Can you actually use a controller for it?
You can.
Oh,
it's
damn.
not.
The game would be impossible.
It does, yeah, because of like the old the aiming mechanics and they're very true to the throwback roots that trying to aim with the dual control sticks just doesn't work. And like I had to put the controller down and like my hands were kind of just resting on the keyboard, and I'm like, what if I like WASD D this and space bar on the thumb, and I'm like, oh wait, I'm playing mouse and keyboard. And I gotta admit, it felt kind of good to be mouse and keyboard. I don't know, I felt dirty. I felt dirty, but at the same time I was like, I kind of like it.
Welcome back. This is the game to play on mouse and keyboard 100%.
Oh, yeah. And I love the fast-paced nature of it. I didn't realize until like my left pinky kind of hit is it the shift button or the caps lock button that turns off the auto run?
Yeah.
One of the two. And it wasn't until and it just happened by happenstance that I realized that auto run is like automatically turned on, because I was like, ooh, I'm really enjoying the fast paced nature of this, because you just take off and you're off to the races. So I love the fact it's super fast paced. Love the weapons. Oh God, that sword. Oh, give me that sword all day, just shooting shit left and right.
So I'll jump in. I had weird expectations going into this. I actually played Dusk at PAX East, which is, I believe, the same company released a game in 2018, maybe? It was recent. So this was released in June. And that one to me was a little more like true Quake. I don't know if you've seen things like that, Tim, but standard shotguns and stuff. I haven't actually played through the game, but it felt very Quake-like with Doom influences to me. But I have a weird thing about these kind of retro shooters that like I see them and I'm always like, oh, that's nice. And then I never want to play them. So going into this game, I was like, okay, I really liked Hexen. It kind of has that Hexen feel to it with the weapons and stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe it might be okay, but I'll probably be mediocre on it. And I was actually blown away. It was awesome. It was so good. It was so refreshing to get back to that style of gameplay. And it was so well crafted. And we're going to get into this in a bit. But like the way that it hits every point of nostalgia possible while also just being a good game at its core. It's not just like a lifeless remake of these games. It becomes its own thing. I was actually blown away by how much I liked it. And I guess we can from there get into pros and then cons maybe of the game. But I'll go back, Berto, what you said about the look of the game. I was blown away by how good the game looked. If I had to guess, it almost seemed like it was like there was a lot of low poly models, but then there was also high poly models.
Yeah.
Like it seemed like your weapons were high poly with like a filter on it. So I feel like there was some filter effects going on.
Yeah, it was like, it's like, this is kind of what you remember from those days, but we put like a nice coat of paint on top of it, so it looks nicer than that.
Yeah, and the lighting and stuff was pretty good.
So nice.
The effects looked great. The speed and the frame rate was awesome. Obviously, not too hard to handle frame rate on a game like that, I guess. But the color also really stood out to me. Like how colorful the levels got felt amazing. Because it still had this weird gothic kind of like, old school, like, I don't know how to explain it, but the 90s FPS shooters had this weird, like, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but like super over the top, like either gloomy or dark or satanic look. Like, to me, it's something like Diablo, something like Doom, and it hit all those notes while still being really colorful, which I liked. What were some pros for you guys in the game?
I definitely the speed. It really got it right. Just how like it was so nice how just you could just be zooming through these levels and just keep like you get ahead of all, like you turn around and there's just these waves and waves of enemies behind you just building up, and you're just like, well, I'm gonna have to figure out how to get myself out of this pickle I just ran myself into, and it really feels right. I I do like a lot of like how faithful they were in a lot of, like, this is, I'm gonna come back to this later, but it, like, how every level it will show you like the number of enemies you have, the number of secrets there are, and there's like a par time at the end where you can see whether or not whether or not you can beat it as fast as the devs want you to be able to beat it, and you never do, but at least in your first playthrough. But it really, it's definitely for fans of the old games, and it makes no bones about it. And yeah, there were many times during the game where I'm like, wow, this really feels exactly like I was, back in my basement, which I'm still in, but playing these old quick games that I grew up on, and it's a good time.
Yeah. So the speed, like, I also thought the difficulty was pretty good. I don't know. I played on hard difficulty. I always do that to myself, but like it felt appropriate. And it felt like the progression of difficulty was pretty good. I know, Tim, you said you played in a certain order, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to it. But the second you told me, I started paying attention to it, and I thought there was actually like a nice difficulty curve as you played through the levels, if you play them in the order they're presented in the codex.
But you can play them in whatever order you want. You have this hub world when you start out, and there's 7 different like zones you can go to that each have 4 levels in them, and you can do them in whatever order you want, and every time you start one of them, you start fresh with just the axe as your weapon. You have to kind of build up your weaponry again.
Yeah, I think it forces you to play 2 before the rest unlock, but essentially the rest, you can play in whatever sequence you want. Berto, what'd you think of the difficulty? Because I definitely like I was cruising through the game, and then all of a sudden I started like hitting some walls and really had to pay attention to, and this is why I brought it up with the movement, like I needed to be moving the whole time, basically.
Yeah, no, you definitely need to be moving, because if you I found myself, I mean, my usual go-to whenever I play any game is to start on normal first to see how normal feels, and then, adjust accordingly if I feel like normal is too easy, or if some games like normal is like super brutally hard, then turn it down. So I'm playing on the normal difficulty setting, and again, maybe it's just because I'm getting back into mouse and keyboard, even, albeit with a little baby game like this one, because compared to other mouse and keyboard games, this is kind of like baby's first mouse and keyboard FPS. Excuse me. I felt that the difficulty rating at normal for me was like, this is just where it needs to be, because I found myself in situations where like I'm breezing through certain sections, and then other sections where I'm getting bombarded with enemies, and I'm like, oh shit, I only have like 46 health. I need to do something, either run or hopefully find some health orbs nearby so I can survive this next wave. So I feel like as far as difficulty goes, for me personally, normal was like the right way to go. I don't think it's making it hard for the sake of being hard. I also appreciate the secrets, because I love just going off the beaten path.
I loved
like
it.
There's one section like early on where I'm like looking on a cliff, and then I kind of just jump down. It's like, you found a secret area, and I'm like, oh great, I didn't die, and I found a secret area.
Yeah, mistakenly stumbling on secrets is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely love it.
And I know that's like to me that's an easy throwback to games like Doom and stuff, but it's so appropriate because it just the way those games worked, like they weren't, they didn't have a lot to work with. So like just like a little cubby that you have to crouch to get into, and if you find bonus health, like that's awesome.
Exactly, like that was a secret area. It's like, oh look, extra health and an alcove that's out of sight.
Yeah. And I also found like I would estimate I found less than a third of the total secrets. Like
me too.
they were not easy to find.
Some of them are just like I said, that one where I'm like, if I didn't jump off that ledge to see what would have happened, I would never have found it.
Yeah. And that it's funny when you stumble upon secrets that you weren't looking for, it's like, oh shit, like they really like put these all over the place. Towards the end of the game, I found a secret where basically there's a switch at the edge of the map, and like there's no reason for you to go over there, but you have to like press the switch on the side of the map that's like hanging off, and it opens a little staircase, and like just like finding stuff like that's great. I imagine, I don't know if you guys tried to like replay a level and speedrun it, but I imagine like the speedrunning community would kind of embrace a game like this. I know.
Yeah. Especially like when you get like what Tim was saying, when you get to the end and it's showing you like, here's your time, here's the part time. Like when I did the first level, I think my time was 13, 14 minutes, and it's like part time 2.5 minutes, and I'm like, well, fuckery.
Yeah, I think I was above par on like 2 levels total, and it was both boss fights. Like
it was that was the same thing for me. Yeah, it was only bosses that was able to do that. But yeah, I would be interested. I don't know if you guys have like, I think we are you guys ready to go on to like some cons and things like that? I definitely loved this game, but I do want to talk about some.
Well, I'm gonna throw some. We could just throw all together because I have a lot more pros, to be honest. But
just kind of taking that time thing. I think adhering to the kind of the rules and mechanics of the old games did kind of bring it back a little bit. I don't want to say this isn't really a fault. I don't want to call this a con, because this is kind of how I play games. I think a lot of people play games. But you kind of want to explore and look around and see all these things and find all these secrets. And I think the game is at its peak when you're just booking it and running and trying to make progress and get through the levels as fast as you can. But if it's your first time playing it, you want to like see everything. And so you're kind of caught in this in between two worlds. And I found myself oftentimes I'd be pouring through all these corners of the map for these secrets, and I'd get there and be like, oh, cool, I found it. Oh, I'm already maxed in this ammo. Like, well, darn. Like, I guess I found the secret. That's cool. But I would have liked, when I wasn't doing that and when I was just booking it through the levels, that was the most fun I was having. So, I feel like the game could have played to its strengths a little bit more by doing, I don't want to say doing away with secrets, but just, it's a conundrum. I don't want to call it a con. I want to call it like a middle of the road thing.
Yeah.
Just like how the game played out.
It's funny because when I started playing the game, I was playing the first way, which is like every dark corner, every little nook and cranny I was checking, and I definitely found a few more secrets that way. But you are right, like about a few levels in, I started playing the game. I was like, you know what, the secrets aren't like insanely important. So like if I see one or if I think of one, I'm gonna go for it. Otherwise I'm gonna try to progress.
Right.
And I do agree with you, Tim, in that the game plays its best when you're really trying to book it.
Oh yeah, no, it absolutely does. The game was meant to be played like just hold W down and don't let go.
Yeah, and just strafe it like crazy.
Yeah,
that being said, there are clearly put in segments that are kind of like a tempo break where it's more puzzle solving or platforming. And that I mean level design I thought was pretty on point. There was 2 levels in particular where it was a small issue that I had where Tim, you were actually watching me play one where just there was a key hidden in a spot that was really weird to hide a key for progression purposes.
Was it that the spot where they put the key was just off, or it was like hard to find?
So basically, an elevator that you would normally progress up, the key was under it, and I understand, like I've played Dark Souls, I had been checking under elevators previously, but like when the elevator went up, you could progress a ton before having to find the actual key. So I feel like the design was a little off there because like it's not immediate that you need a key, so you don't really have to check the elevator. So I actually found myself like combing through that level to find it. And when I finally found it, I was kind of like, oh, that seems a little cheap. Also, there was a portal thing. There was a portal puzzle in the very last set of levels that just didn't actually work for me. It was green, green, yellow, yellow, and it just didn't work. And I reloaded the game and it still didn't work. And then I found out that basically there was like an enemy somewhere that was like a million miles in the distance, and I just killed it. Like,
and it worked.
And then it worked. So that's more of a bug, I think, than anything. But
it seems like portals are maybe they're shy in front of enemies.
That was actually the only time I looked up I literally looked up a guide. I was like, okay, it's telling me this combination of portals. I've tried that. I've tried it in reverse. I've tried like different ways to do it, and it just wouldn't work. So I don't know what is up with that level, because even one of the videos I watched of a guy beating it, I feel like didn't know what the fuck was going on, because he tried it a few times and it just worked one of the times. So I think that might be more of a bug, but I think level design overall was great. I do want to touch on, and I think it might be my favorite level, which we should ask everybody what their favorite level was. I think it was called the Foundry, where the Forge Master was the last boss, but that level had some crazy platforming sections in it.
Yeah.
That was the one where, it had like, it actually reminded me of Half-Life, and I think I liked it because of that so much, that it had these cool like industrial areas where you're jumping, pipes and spinning platforms and stuff. And I personally loved that platforming element that the game kind of took on. I don't know. How do you guys feel about, because I know platforming in first-person shooters is tricky.
I was about to say, I was surprised with how well the platforming felt in those sections. Because I'm assuming what you were going to say is like platforming and first-person shooters usually don't go very well hand in hand, because you're either a really good first-person shooter or a really good platformer. There's very few games that can sort of skirt that line between the two well, and this one felt really good with the platforming.
So,
I agree 100%.
I think platforming and first-person shooters generally gets a bad rap. I see people who just immediately dismiss any platforming puzzles in first-person shooters because they just say like, "Oh, it's not built for this." But I think once you get a handle on the controls pretty well, I think they work really well. I do think the controls it felt like they were a little bit off of like the original Quake, kind of like strafe jumping mechanics that if you're like a diehard Quake person, you're gonna notice. But I think that they work perfectly well enough for the levels that were in the game.
Yeah. I think it seemed like if you jumped and hit a platform, it would kind of slow your momentum a little bit. At least I noticed that, because at points you had to jump up, and jumping up always scares me in those games, because it's like, well, you have to like get over the height and stuff. And it seemed like it would kind of catch you. I did also notice that strafe jumping, definitely you could do a little bit with that. I was finding some secrets with that and stuff.
Yeah, and also the default settings had it so when you like move strafe left, like you'd lean left, and same with right. I turned that off. I didn't like that personally. I felt like it kind of just made me feel not nauseous, but just like a little like woozy, I guess, from looking on that. But it was interesting. Like I could see jumping into the games without really being like diehard about this stuff, being like, ooh, like this feels really comfortable. So I don't know. I think it's really up in the air.
Well, so that was I think it's called the Foundry or something. That was my favorite level. Or the Forge? I forget what it was called.
Forges? I really like the Forges.
Yeah. What were your guys' favorite level? And maybe not. There is one also aesthetically that I loved, which probably everyone's going to say the same one, but what were your guys' favorite levels?
I do think the Forges were my favorite. I really liked it was one of them. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like it was like the trap level, I guess. There were all sorts of traps.
I thought like isn't that the Forges? Am I wrong with that?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
it is. One of the Forges levels, like one of the four. But aesthetically, I really liked. I don't know if it's what everyone chooses, but I'm forgetting. I'm blanking on the names of these, but it was like a really outdoor area. It was very bright and like deserty. I really like
the big pyramid.
Yes.
It's like the Pilgrim's Path or the Pilgrimage or something like that. Which is the first like really long set of levels you hit, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Interesting. I was gonna mention that level for a different reason, but Berto, what was your favorite level?
Forges, definitely like when you get. I mean, it seems like we're sort of all in the same boat there.
Interesting. Yeah, I was expecting a lot of different answers actually. I think the Forges is just such a nice. It's where the game really kicks off with the platforming and puzzle solving. So I think it's a nice tempo change, and it's essentially the start of the end game of that game to me, where the enemies start getting really hard, the puzzles get a little harder, the platforming gets harder, and the levels past
platforming
that. Yeah, the platforming was dope. I do agree with you, Tim. That level is pretty dope. The Pilgrim one, just because it was so long. I love the enemy design in those ones too, where it was like kind of the elemental enemies. I was expecting everybody to say the what's it called? It's like the Waygate or whatever. The churchy one with all the stained glass. I thought that level looked amazing.
The early one, I think the first one of the first 2 levels.
I played it second to last. Which the Void is the last level, right? Is the Void? It's the one with all the guys who have like wizard staffs and the guys with the maces.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of big and open. There's a bunch of stained glass windows, and the music was pretty dope. Which
it was cool.
I wanted to ask you, Tim, what did you think about the music? Because I had some mixed feelings on it.
I did as well. And just the sound design in general, I wanted to touch on that. I thought for the most part, the music did its job. It wasn't there weren't really many tracks that blew me away. There weren't many things that were like, okay, like this is a real banger. I'm gonna just download this and listen to it. But it really set the backdrop for what the game is trying to do. It didn't have that main Doom theme that everyone knows, like nothing on that level where it's just like super catchy and great. But it's going for a different aesthetic, and I think it complemented that. For the sound design, the guttural sounds of the enemies were great. The sounds of the weapons, perfect. A lot of great stuff.
The nostalgia was perfect on those.
The sound you get when you swing the axe and you hear the clunk, I'm like, it was such a satisfying sound.
There was actually a moment in my stream where, when you pick up a new weapon, even if it's an old weapon, and he kind of laughs like the main guy. Yeah. And I literally stopped my stream and was like, this is the most like genius little nostalgic, like that sets the mood of that game perfectly, because it harkens back to that Doom, like, like the essence they were capturing, where you're like this super badass, you know what I mean? Like, which nowadays is a little cliche, but like it was perfect for that. I like the sound design a lot. I kind of agreed to him. Like the music felt atmospheric, if not at sometimes a little like off as far as pacing. Like sometimes you'd be in this like nice sort of like, it felt like a forest theme, and you're shooting a bunch of enemies and you're kind of like, huh? And then like the tempo would kick in as you progress through the level. But
as far as music went, in my opinion, it was like it got the job done, but it was nothing. It was like it was forgettable is like the most I could say about it, in that it's not super memorable, where you're going to be like what Tim was saying, you have like the main Doom theme where it's kind of like running in your head, and that's like the one thing you remember. There was nothing in the soundtrack that I'm like, oh yeah, that was such like an awesome song for that level. It just did the job that it needed to do, in my opinion.
And part of me wishes, like, early on I was like, man, where's like the heavy metal and stuff? And I know that would just be copying like, Doom.
The entire time I was playing, I was like, I'm hoping that one of these levels is going to have a track where it's like, oh, this is the fucking track right here.
This is where I use my soul mode and axe and just whirling through everything.
Like,
before leaving leaving this topic, I did want to touch on this, and I don't know if I'm hesitant to bring this up because I'm almost worried that it was just on my end. I didn't do any research about this, but every time I launched the game, for the entirety of the game running, I heard like a crackling in my left ear.
That's probably just your shitty headset.
It's only this game, and it fit the aesthetic of everything going on, and I'd almost want to say like, launch the game and tell me if you're not
it's just during launch.
No, the entirety that the game was running.
You had just a crackle in your left ear.
It wasn't like a crackle, like it was like kind of like the ambiance of the game, I feel like.
Interesting.
And if it's just me, if it's just my end,
I want to say that it is, because I'm just very hypersensitive to
but I noticed it like
my headphones. So
like the third or fourth time I like launched the game, I was like, well, I'm just, you know, this is just what the game is, and it might be in my level as well.
I was about to say, Chris in chat just said maybe you might want to get yourself checked out. You might have a brain aneurysm.
Brain aneurysm.
I definitely have had several brain aneurysms.
Smell toast.
I don't think it's related to this game, fortunately. But what about mechanics? I want to bring up one main thing that I think I kind of had gripes with, but it was the soul mode.
Sure.
So for those of you who don't know, essentially every enemy in the game would drop a soul. You know, depending on how powerful the enemy was, it would be different levels. You could also find them like power-ups scattered throughout the game that would just fill your soul meter all the way up. And when your soul meter was full, you could unleash it with the right click, and it would buff all of your weapons in different ways. The great thing about it is the buff versions of all the weapons, really cool.
Yeah.
Every single weapon has a really cool soul mode version of it.
Dude, I would get like my staff out and be like,
it becomes super powerful. Even the axe, like we were talking about, you just hold it out and it just turns into this central power
of death,
or an underwater submarine.
Shreds everything that's near. And that's awesome. But the way it kind of works in the game, I don't think it really worked, because essentially I found myself sitting at max soul mode going like, I gotta save this for a rainy day, and you're sitting on it in max soul mode for sometimes levels at a time, just going like, I don't need it yet, I don't need to use it. And then the other side of it is you just show up at a boss and you're at max soul mode, and that's the boss. Like, I think there were only a couple bosses during the entire game that took me multiple tries, just because you just take out your biggest weapon and activate soul mode and it just can't hold up. You just crush it. And that kind of dichotomy of like, either you're holding on to it, just absorbing souls as snacks because they don't do anything for you, or you're just using it all at once and it's just super powerful. Like, I feel like they needed to come up with a slightly better way to balance it so that you'd be using it more often and it wasn't quite as devastating to the bosses, so that, like, they're all, I feel bad because the boss fights seemed pretty cool and well designed, and a lot of them I just essentially sidestepped by just activating soul mode and just destroying them.
Yeah, the first. Sorry.
Go ahead, Garrett.
Oh, I'm just saying, like, the first 3 or so bosses, I remember just melting with soul mode and being like, oh, is that it? Like, at the end. Towards the end of the game, I do think the bosses actually have decent, like, kind of protection from that in the way they're designed. But Berto, you could jump in, because
no, I was gonna say, like, I totally love the fact that if you get to, when you get to the boss and you have soul mode, you could absolutely fuck them up. I felt like I didn't feel like more of a badass than in those moments, because you just made super quick work of them. When I got to that, I remembered, back in Final Fantasy VI, when you use like a Phoenix down on like any undead enemy, or like, suplexing the fucking Phantom Train, shit like that makes you feel like the ultimate badass. I love that. So
yeah,
it might have made the boss fight super anticlimactic because you were, soul mode is overpowered. But I felt so good at that moment because I just took them down in like a couple of hits.
And
if there's a better way for generating the soul mode,
yeah, I'm trying to think of
these pickups, then it would have worked a lot better. Because it just felt like, okay, I've had this stuff saved up, I'm just gonna dump it, and it's done.
Yeah,
and it's like there's no point in saving it into the next level because you start from scratch anyway.
And when you find the big soul mode, you're like, okay, I guess I'll just blow it and then pick that up. I agree with you a lot, Tim. And I think I agree with you both in that the soul mode is really like the heart and soul of what this game's about. Like, the way the weapons work is amazing. They're so well thought out. And we could talk about weapons after this, because I think the weapons are just fantastic in general. But I do agree, Tim, it sucks that you're just sitting on soul mode for the most of it. I only really used it as a panic button. And even then, like, the way it filled up was just so fast. Like, I almost think they should have done, like, you can use it once per level, or it's the kind of thing where it's like, the more souls you gain, the longer it lasts, but you can use it whenever you want. So it's like, if you decrease the amount that the souls actually gave you, Like that way you could build it up for like a super big boss fight, long thing, or you could use it in really short bursts against short enemies.
Well, it seemed like on the last boss they kind of changed the mechanic a little bit. Whereas like when you were damaging the boss, it would fill up your soul meter.
Yeah, well, the last boss was only damaged by soul meter.
Right. I think if they continued in that vein a little bit, and instead of like, you're collecting souls by killing enemies, you charge it up by dealing damage, and you don't have to be full to activate it, and then it decreases over time or something. So you're not just stockpiling this stuff.
That would actually encourage some speed too, which would be interesting.
I feel like they just needed to change the way it worked a little bit, just because, like I said, it was so sick the way they implemented the soul mode, but it just felt like I wasn't using it in situations where I think I maybe should have, just because I was like, oh, I gotta save this for rainy day. And just the way it played out in context of the game, I feel like it did.
It's funny because I think there was one boss I fought where I didn't have soul meter, and it was such a good boss fight. I think the easy solution for this is just make it so that every boss has protection from soul mode, in that they kind of have invulnerability phases. There was that good boss, and I think it was the Forge Master actually in the Forges, where you like pour the acid on him and he becomes weak during that time. So you can use the soul meter to pump a ton of damage, but it's only going to work for like 1 or 2 acid like times.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the easy method. You don't have to change that much of the game. I do think a method that lets you kind of build it up for a longer amount of time but use it whenever would kind of work, except it would be overpowered in certain situations with certain, because like obviously the Ethereum would be overpowered if you could just flick it on, shoot it, and flick it off. I do actually think that gun, and I'm not 100% sure, I feel like they built in that the more powerful the gun, the quicker it actually uses soul mode though. Because when I use the Ethereum thing, it seemed to go much faster. I don't know if that's a thing. That could be a fix too, but
almost all the bosses in the game I beat by just activating soul mode and using it.
Oh, just soul mode and just straight
almost every boss.
Straight staff. But let's get into weapons, because I loved the weapons. I don't know about you guys, and we could even maybe try to make like a tier list. I think that would be kind of fun to try to generate one quick.
It was really fun to see sort of like these mystic takes on classical FPS weapons. And what I mean by that is there's clear analogs to, your FPS weapons with these weapons. Like you have your, what's it called? I have the weapons list in front of me because I don't remember. The Staff of the Azure Orb is like your machine gun. You have your Celestial Claw, which is like your rocket launcher, because you can do like your rocket. Or
that thing was so absurd too. The actual lore behind that is amazing. I don't know if you guys read that.
Planets.
Yeah, and then you blow up the Earth once in a while.
I did see that message. I was like, "What?"
Yeah, I was so confused at first.
So I loved that take. Like you have what's it called? The big magical rod looking thing, which is like your shotgun.
Dude, okay, right away, favorite weapon, go. Mine's that one. That weapon is so well designed. Like it's your classic super shotgun from Doom, but it's basically a mace that shoots crystals.
Yes.
And it flings enemies across the room.
Oh my god, I love that. I love it. But as much as I love that, I do love the Celestial Claw.
You were a big fan of the rocket launcher kind of guy.
Planets.
It's such a clever idea. Like it was so unique how they took the concepts of the weapons and made them into these like ultra like grim dark wizard shit. Like without overdoing it, until you hit soul mode where you're shooting suns that explode. Tim, what was your favorite?
I have to agree with Berta on this one, just because it's just it's just it comes down to the rocket launcher mechanic in general. It's just so much fun to circle strafe around enemies and just like shoot rockets at the way they're headed.
And the aiming is
it's great. I do agree. Something you said on stream yesterday was like the way that I forget the name of it, the mace, essentially the ice mace, like crystal mace, whatever it's called.
I'm gonna look up the things right now.
Name is fucking the Star of Torment.
Yeah, it's such a good twist on the the shotgun in that it's essentially has infinite range. And I really like the way that it, each projectile mattered. You could
Yeah.
hit with like a couple of them and it would do like a very small amount of damage, or you could like chunk them and hit with like the entire blast and it would do a ton of damage. It was like that was super satisfying, and it was great when you got an overkill with it and it would just knock them back and pin them to the wall.
And you could hit multiple enemies with it. Like, it was such a well-made shotgun, the way it sprayed those things. Obviously the Aternum is kind of overpowered, but like the first time you use soul mode and use it, it's like, holy shit. Like the way they powered things up was so good in that game. Let's do a quick little, I think we're coming close to ramping up, but like, let's try to generate a quick tier list here. All right. So, does anyone think they have a worst weapon in mind? Cause I do.
Just overall?
Yeah. Like actual power rankings.
Do we factor in soul power?
Let's do non-soul power.
Non-soul power?
Yeah.
I would say the worst weapon in terms of just like usefulness. It's so close. It's between the staff of the Azure Orb and the
the staff?
The Volt Ride. It's between those two. It's the blue mana ones that really like.
The staff is so good. I can't believe you didn't like the staff.
It's not bad. It's just amongst its peers. It's just
it's like it's good, but compared to everything else.
See, I think the Whisper's Edge is the worst weapon by far. The sword, like, it's cool.
I found that like both of those weapons look like, if you're thinking about it that way, the Staff of the Azure Orb and the Whisper's Edge are like the mana efficient weapons, right? Like, they get the job done eventually. They're weak, but they're easy to confirm damage with. You can do a lot with them if you have the patience. But they're not bad. It's just that, like, you gotta.
I feel like those weapons are like your jack of all trades, master of none. Like, you use them, like, in most situations, they're kind of your go-tos, but they're not significantly good at any one thing, and that kind of doesn't help them stand out. It's the fact they're like, oh yeah, it's usually like, it does decent damage. There's very few situations where, for example, like with the the Whisper's Edge, with the soul mode, like, you get the bigger slashes and it bounces off walls, but unless you're like in a small enclosed space, that doesn't really do you much good, because
I don't think I ever used it in soul mode, because I feel like there was better options. It's weird to me that you didn't like the Volt Ride though, because the Volt Ride to me was like, I thought one of the stronger weapons for essentially what the Whisper's Edge did, which was clear multiple enemies.
I found like the mechanic involved with that, like we were discussing it while you were on stream yesterday, at least to our understanding, is, if you kill an enemy with it, it's kind of convulses, and if you continue to shoot it, it'll shoot out chain lightning, which can just, chain to all the enemies around it and kill all of them at once, which is great. But it just chewed through ammo so quickly, and on an individual damage basis, it was relatively weak, especially for how much you're using. That I found that when in situations where the game kind of steered me towards it, I was like, oh man, like, well, I'm gonna be out of ammo pretty quickly. I'd prefer to be using the other weapons, but just overall, I'd say that was probably my least favorite weapon.
Okay, I could see that. But I mean, I think we're all in agreement as far as like the weapons are dope in the game.
Yeah.
And the slow mode.
Without a doubt.
I was actually, and it's funny how much nostalgia you get for this game, but I was starting to get little hints of like Turok 2, as far as like things like the Volt Ride, doing chain lightning when you overcharge guys, things like the Star of Torment, like bouncing and ricocheting when you use soul mode. Like, if I had one wish for the game, it would actually be to like that they went a little crazier with the weapons, in the fact that they could do some unique shit. Like, I think Turok 2 is one of my favorite FPSs just because they went nuts with the weapons. Like, you have the weapon that shoots the orb out, and then when you shoot the orb, it explodes and does tons of damage. That's a very Unreal Tournament kind of thing. I know.
Turok 2, the one where we said that's the cerebral bore.
That is the cerebral bore. Yes, that is the.
It had like a mythical looking cerebral board type weapon.
Yeah, that'd be sick. Like I think it's not a negative of the game because the weapons are so well balanced. Like there are some lesser weapons, but they're still pretty good. And situationally they're all good. Like that I love that they made it that certain enemies are just weaker or stronger for certain weapons. It's not quite like an elemental weakness kind of thing, but you could definitely use every weapon against certain enemies 100%. I particularly love the enemies with the shields. I think it was in like the third level I played, like the Solarium, maybe it was called, where they would actually reflect things back to you. So using certain,
The solar something or other.
I think it was that level. And it's funny because if you use like Volt Ride on them, they would just ricochet lightning back at you at the speed of sound and crush you. So I think if I had one wish for the game, it would be that they went a little more in depth on the weapons. Again,
nuts.
Don't fix what ain't broke because the weapons are so well balanced. Even the overpowered weapons, like the ammo usage of them, like keeps them in check. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess making a tier list is kind of silly, but because it's basically like top tier, mid tier, which is just the axe is mid tier.
Yeah.
And the other weapons are low tier, maybe. I still think the staff is like mid or high tier. I think you're all terrible.
It's not bad. It's just it wasn't satisfying to use at all. That's a big.
That is true. It wasn't that satisfying.
I don't like weapons that home in on enemies, and I don't like slowly splashing enemies to death.
Sure.
Gets outclassed by the weapons very like once you get the other weapons, you realize how outclassed it gets.
Yeah, but the soul mode is so sick though.
Yeah, that's true. That's why that was a big descriptor for why it was low for me. But if I had one gripe about the game, it was kind of the soul mechanic. I wish it was implemented in a different way that this could just be how I play games, but I feel like that's kind of how the game was steering. It was like, oh, I'm getting towards the boss. I better not just make sure I'm at max soul power so I can just avoid sidestep this probably well-designed fight. But if they were able to retool that a little bit to make it so it wasn't just like this big dump, that would have been great for me. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed the game a lot. Really glad I had an opportunity to play it.
Yeah. Any other pros and cons that we could think of, by the way? Because I think we're kind of wrapping up, right?
Apparently, it gave me a brain aneurysm, so I'm going to put
That's
that
possible.
As con.
That's
Smell burnt toast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we could do silly ratings, but let's do that in a second. The one thing I wanted to ask as we're wrapping up is, A, do you think you'd be interested in playing Dusk? And B, do you want to see more of these kind of retro style games come out in the future? Like me personally, like I want to see what these guys could do with something like Half-Life, where they make it a little more story oriented, play around with concepts like that, like a little bit of a slower shooter, more weapons, more story. I think that could be interesting. I kind of love what it's Indefatigable as the developers. They did this game in Dusk basically. But personally, I would love to see more of these kind of games. I'd love to see like a Turok. Like I'd love to see a new Turok game in this style, something like that. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Hey, keep them coming. I would love to see, like, I'm a sucker for nostalgia. Like, you put anything that's out there that reminds me of, the days of yore where things were easier and the world wasn't going to shit, then I will play all those games. And, if you do it with this level of polish, then I will extra play your fucking game. So please give me more of this. And like you said, I would love to see something in the style of a Half-Life. If these guys make the next Half-Life 3, that would be awesome. No, but I'm a sucker for all these. Give me more nostalgia, this level of polish, this level of, love that they clearly put into creating this game. I'm all for it. Keep them coming.
I'm definitely gonna play Dusk. I actually got it as a package with this game. I got them together like a discount, so I will play that. I will taper back on what I would initially say is to be like an emphatic yes. Like I would love to see more games like this, and I will say that I don't know if this company could do a good Half-Life. I think they clearly showed they know their source material when it comes to the id series, but I think we can kind of all agree that the story was just kind of there.
True.
Like,
Yeah. The story is like, eh.
It's just kind
It's
of
like you're the champion. Now go champion.
and it's great. I didn't need any more than that.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Apple is a bit more of a narrative experience, and it might not be best in their hands. But I do think if any company is as dedicated to the source material as this company is to early id games, then they are more than welcome in my book to take a stab at trying to get back that retro feel. But I'm excited to see what Dusk is like, and I am excited to get back into the sci-fi things. I do miss a good just regular old shotgun. I gotta say that.
That is true, actually.
Chris Chat brings up a good question that I want to bring to you guys. He asks, is this a good game if you're in it just for the nostalgia, or if you're a first-time player who's never, like, let's say you'd never played the Quakes or the Dooms of yesteryear. If you're a first-time player, could you jump into this game and enjoy it without having that nostalgic background that the three of us clearly have?
That is a difficult question to answer from my perspective. I think yes. I would like to think yes, at least. I think that this type of gameplay has fallen out of favor in terms of mainstream of just like what you see. But I think that it was the marquee type of game for the mid-90s for a reason. And I don't think that it's an obsolete type of game at all. I think that without the nostalgia, you could definitely jump in and be like, oh, this is really satisfying, just killing all these enemies and trying to make progress into these levels. But I can't say it with 100% certainty because those games were so important to my development of my taste in games. So.
Yeah, I think if you don't have any previous experience, it's definitely going to be a little bit tough just to get into the game. A, for visuals, B, for just overall style, the speed at which you're running, the way enemies fire and the way you shoot is very different from most shooters nowadays.
Yeah.
So without that nostalgia, I think it's a bigger like skill ceiling bump, and it's going to take a little bit more to get used to. But I do think this game would be enjoyable for like 99 out of 100 people, so long as you're willing to give it a chance to kind of develop. Because again, if you haven't played a game like Quake or Doom or Turok even, it's going to be a bit of a kind of hit in the face with the style of this game.
I agree. It would definitely be a hard sell for someone who doesn't have that nostalgia background.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're comparing it to games that you're playing now, obviously it's going to be a graphical downgrade. The controls aren't going to be as tight as what you're used to because it's very much built on that nostalgia sort of background. That being said, if you are jumping into it for the first time, at least in my opinion, and you're willing to give it, 20, 30 minutes until you get used to it, there is fun to be had with this game.
Yeah, there's something about that. Just how powerful you feel sprinting around at 90 miles an hour, however fast it's going. You want to wrap this up with silly ratings, and then we'll clock out.
Do this with silly ratings. Tim, what is your rating for Amid Evil?
I'm gonna give it a Whisper's Edge out of Volt Ride.
Well, Volt Ride's the upper echelon for you. I thought you said you hated it. No comment. Berto, what's your silly rating?
My silly rating is going to be, I'm going to give it a celestial claw to pull a star out of the sky and into the Moon Guardian boss.
Oh, okay. That's pretty good. I'm going to give it a 1 out of 7 secrets found, but you came under par for the time. So it's pretty good. But yeah.
That's pretty good.
I mean, one secret was well above average for me. It's hard to find secrets. I think we all love this game. Go play it. This has been episode 31 for Split Screen Cynics. It was a Game Club episode. Keep in mind, we do have a new Game Club episode. It's going to be a month from now. We're playing Baba Is You, the little tiny indie puzzler. Go check that out. Please send us comments, questions, etc. if you want to be a part of it. If not, check us out on Instagram at Split Screen Cynics. Take out the E's. Our website, splitscreencynics.com. Check us out on You the Gamers. We're hosted on there, but I've actually started doing some content on there. I'm sure these guys will be doing content on there before you know it. And you can catch me on twitch.tv/GarrettGetsInto if you want to see me play games like this or other stuff, because I was actually streaming this game. I'll probably stream some Bob As You in the future. Berto, what can we find you at?
You can find me pretty much on all the social medias at I'll Be the One and Only. Information is right there. If you're watching us on Twitch, I spelled it out. It looks semi-legible. Yeah, that's where you can find me. Got nothing else to plug.
Tim, hit it up.
You can find me crying in the corner after losing my next CS match if we keep playing the way we did today. But that's neither here nor there.
I'm sorry I brought that up again. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, everybody in chat, for participating.
Thank you, everyone. We love you all.
Thanks for everything. Yeah, whatever. Everyone throw your cats. I'm gonna do the cat throwing thing every time. We didn't even talk about it. That's what I love. Thank you.
Where are you?
Thank you so much. Keep on gaming. Bye-bye.
All right.
Take it easy.